it's a full-blown war and the casualties have only been rising. But an ongoing war also has another challenge. That's the battle of shifting narratives. Israel has shared this image, asking, "Where were your eyes on October 7th?" The image depicts a Hamas terrorist standing in front of a baby. Israel's response to Palestine's "All eyes at Rafah," which was shared over 35 million times in just about 24 hours. This comes days after Israel launched the attack on Rafah late Sunday. At least 45 people were killed and 200 others were injured after the Israeli airstrike hit a tent camp housing in Rafah for displaced people. Amid strong international pushback and criticism from even allies seen close to Israel, Prime Minister Netanyahu has said the attack was a severe mistake. Despite our utmost efforts not to harm innocent lives, last night there was a tragic mistake, Netanyahu has said in an address to Israel's parliament. "We are investigating the incident and will obtain a conclusion because this is our policy," he added. But is Rafah really the pushback point? An article in Times in April quotes US State Department's internal memo accessed by NPR, warning that Israelis are facing major, possibly generational damage to their reputation as a result of its military conduct in Gaza. Officially, though, US, even after the latest attack on Rafah, has said that Israel hasn't crossed the red line. To quote the White House, the US does not believe Israel's action in Rafah amount to a major ground operation that could cross a red line for President Joe Biden and trigger a possible change in US policy. That loss of goodwill extends beyond Israel. Indeed, lawmakers in countries considered to be among Israel's closest allies have expressed concerns about the impact that the war stands to have not just on Israel's credibility, but on their own. This includes countries such as Germany, which among Israel's European partners has been perhaps one of the most staunch defenders of the country. Germany, in fact, considers it as its special responsibility to defend Israel for its role, considering how it perceives its own role in perpetuating genocide against European Jews during the Holocaust. Of the 193 member states of the United Nations, as many as 143 now recognize the Palestinians' right to exist as a geographical and political entity. Practically, 3/4 of the international community sees Palestine as a state. The other 50 that don't include United States, Canada, Australia, and most EU members. Canada also has taken a strong stand against Israel. But remember, the Gaza war broke out after the October 7 Hamas attack on southern Israel, resulting in the deaths of more than 1,170 people, mostly civilians, according to an AFP tally based on Israeli official figures, catching Israel completely off guard. 8 months on, since the attack on South Israel by Hamas, according to Gaza Health Ministry, over 36,000 people have been killed and over 80,000 people injured. And around over 1,127 Israelis have been killed, 8,000 injured, and almost half of those taken as hostages, that is 125, are still hostage. Is there a change in equations globally? Is there a change in perceptions? And as I said in the beginning, is this a battle of narratives as well? India, in fact, has also responded and has also expressed deep concerns about Israelis' strikes on the refugee camps in Rafah and emphasized that New Delhi has consistently called for the protection of the civilian population and respect for international humanitarian law. The heartbreaking loss of civilian lives in the displacement camp in Rafah is a matter of deep concern. We have consistently called for the protection of the civilian population and respect for international humanitarian law in the ongoing conflict. India has said, referring to the airstrikes by Israel on refugee camp in Gaza's Rafah. It's not as simple, it's not as black and white, it's a war. But in 2024, a war in itself is fatal, a war in itself is unheard of for an entire generation. But it's not just that, it's also so many aspects to this. I'm being joined by Professor Madhav Nalapat, who's a strategic affairs analyst, Ashok Sajjanar, who's a former ambassador, Dror Eydar, who's a former Israel ambassador to Italy and San Marino, Issa Amro, who's a Palestinian activist. Thank you very much, all four of you, for joining us. To you first, Mr. Dror Eydar, thank you very much for joining us. And I totally understand, and I must say, both of you, Dror Eydar as well as Issa Amro, thank you very much for joining us. I understand it's extremely tough for both of you, but there are so many aspects that the world is looking at, and we are trying to understand this in a much deeper way. While our hearts go out to those who are in the conflict zone, those who are victims of this, there's much at stake globally. And as I was coming to you, Mr. Dror Eydar, first let me just ask you, as Israel put out their version of where were the eyes on October 7th, what was Israel looking at? Was it a response to what was the massively shared image that was shared from Palestine side a few days ago?
Good evening from Israel. I don't know, you spoke about attack. It wasn't attack. It was a massacre of neo-Nazis that beheaded our sons, that raped our daughters, that burned alive our fathers and sons together. What are you talking about? An attack? And we are not speaking about Palestinians. We are not speaking about the Palestinian Authority. We're speaking about a Nazi regime that took control Gaza Strip and used its civilians as human shields. This is why there are lots of casualties. But even your numbers are wrong, because the UN has published 1 month ago new numbers, half of these numbers that you mentioned. I suggest everyone to be updated. In any case, we killed many terrorists, but still remain terrorists there with lots of weapons, lots of tunnels. They used most of the money of the international community, not for the welfare of their people, but for building tunnels and smuggling weapons and using all their place as a greatest terrorist post ever constructed. So about what we are doing, Israel has supplied more than half a million tons of humanitarian aid, 400,000 tons of food. This is unprecedented. I did not hear about the allies in the Second World War that supplied food to Nazi Germany. This is what we're talking. Israel is in existential, under existential threat, and all our enemy are looking at us. We have to complete our mission and to free Gaza from this brutal regime and to give hope to the people there. The people that were killed because Hamas put weapons among population. But I want to speak about the hypocrisy of the world. Where were all of you when half million Syrians were killed by Assad. Where were you when in Iran they killed and hanged tens of thousands of their citizens? Where was all the world when Arab kill Arab, when Muslim kill Muslim? No one cares. But when Jews defend themselves, this is beyond any expectation. Look, we have two models of a Jewish existential existence in history. First, to be like Jesus, to be on the cross, to be victims. Second, to build our independent state and to defend ourselves. What happened in October 7th cannot stay without any response. We have to eliminate these new Nazis.
No, certainly.
And to free Gaza and to free
in fact,
citizens.
Dror Eydar, I totally understand what point you're putting across and why. Right, Eydar, Mr. Dror Eydar, I totally understand what point you're putting across, and while I gave you ample time to speak your point of view, and we will return for more. And of course, Israel has the right to respond. But the question that we are really looking at, how is the world changing with what's unfolding between Israel and Hamas with respect to Rafah as well?
Care.
Let me just come across.
You have to understand. Let me just respond to this. You have to understand that in matter of existential threat, we do not care what is the hypocritical world think about us. We take care of this poor. Why don't you speak about Egypt?
What about the civilians? Though, as I said, I have other panelists. I will get back to you, sir. I'm sure the other panelists also have a right to respond. So I do have more questions for you, but we will return to you in a bit, sir. Let me just go across to Issa Amro at this point. Mr. Issa, if you look at over the last few months, last few weeks, you have several countries who have recognized the need for Palestine to be, for the statehood for Palestine, as it were. You have got a lot of support. In fact, the image that seemed to have gone viral, all eyes on Rafah. But how do you really look at the kind of response that Israel as well as Palestine are receiving at this point globally from the world?
Thank you very much. I'm talking to the Indian people who really had an experience with the British colonies and who were colonized and who were oppressed by the British. And many will say it's not colonies and the British were coming to give aid to the Indian. The Dror is lying. Israel is not giving the Palestinians any food. Anything, even the aid which is coming from West Bank. I have many videos I can share with you and share with him of Israeli settlers attacking the trucks, attacking the drivers, attacking everybody, and they are not allowing. Israel is offering us zero, something else. Israel is stealing our taxation, our money. In the West Bank, we are suffering from Israeli settler violence, from the army brutality. I'm talking about West Bank. And even the Palestinian Authority, not Hamas, is under severe pressure. And they are not able to pay the salaries for the employees because the Israeli finance minister is refusing to transfer the money to the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, Fatah, not Hamas.
No, Issa Amro, one question.
Are really,
while you are making all of these allegations, there's also another aspect. And while there's outright support for Palestine, there's also concerns about how Hamas has been using civilians as a shield and are increasing or adding to the war casualties. And this is something that has echoed across the world as well. Even though Palestine is getting a lot of support, there are concerns about civilians being used as shields.
Listen to me. Give me the same time as Dror. Then you ask your question, please. I didn't finish.
I will, 100%. That's why I'm coming back to you.
Don't come back to me. I will stop. I will not talk if you don't give me the same time you gave to Dror. I have to correct.
No, go ahead, sir. Please go ahead. I'm right at you only. Please go ahead.
Yes. Don't be biased and be professional when you talk to me, and don't disturb me, please. Okay, I'm talking to the Indian people. Dror is
Sure.
lying, and I'm not talking about allegation. It's facts with videos, with the UN, with the international community, and Israel now being exposed for being an apartheid country, for being for doing genocide, for doing war crimes in Gaza and even in the West Bank. This is the reality which is making many people in the world to understand the reality of the state of Israel. And Israel is not defending itself. Israel is defending its occupation, its apartheid, its illegal settlements, burning the refugees in Rafah, burning them alive in their tents is not defense. Everybody in the world almost told Israel, don't attack the civilians in Rafah, don't kill the civilians in Gaza, don't target the civilians in Gaza. And we are now around 40,000 Palestinians. The majority of them are kids and women being killed. So please don't, try to lie to the international community. The Indian people are very smart. They know more about the reality on the ground now in Gaza and in the West Bank. If Hamas is in Gaza, why West Bank is under a severe attack from the Israeli settlers without any accountability? Without any accountability, Israel is not giving the Palestinians food. We buy our own food, we buy our own water, we buy our own electricity, and they don't let us buy enough. They don't let us buy enough electricity or enough water. They control everything in our life. They control all aspects of our life. And for
All
us,
right.
the war didn't
Sir,
start
I believe I've given
7.
both of you,
We live
I've given you ample time to put your
time.
position forward.
Yes, give the same time, the same equal time with me and him. It's pity to hear him talking like that about killing civilian and justifying civilian. We never justified killing the civilians on October 7th. We felt sorry about them and we condemned killing the civilians. And now Israeli leaders, Israeli officials are proud of their Israeli soldiers who are bombing schools, who are bombing universities, who are bombing hospitals, who are attacking refugees in their tents, women and kids, and they are justifying that. And they don't care about the international community.
I believe
Israel
I have given you ample time, and the same as... No, I believe, allow me to get the introductory remarks of the others as well, sir, at this point. Thank you for making your position. I think we've heard you out well, loud and clear, sir. Professor Madhav Nalapat, if I could come to you at this point. We've heard both the gentlemen. They, of course, have extremely strong opinions. We must remember that this is coming in between a war. Professor Madhav Nalapat, let's look at what US said, that Israel has not crossed the red line. Biden administration does not see any reason whatsoever to change their stand on the ties with Israel. But you have the other side, where there seems to be an overwhelming response to Palestine as well, from even countries that would have been otherwise close allies of Israel. How do you look at this?
Well, Sneha, the first point is that India was among the very first countries to recognize Palestine as an independent state. And therefore, we would welcome the fact that countries that are part of the European Union are finally doing this more than 7 decades later than India did. Having said that, I would like to point out that our friend from Israel is right. Hamas is an existential threat. But we in India have some questions. Why was this existential threat ignored for so long, including by Mr. Prime Minister Netanyahu? Everybody knew the reality of Hamas. I have personally witnessed the kind of textbooks that Hamas has been using in Gaza, which spew hatred on the Jewish community and hatred on the Christian community. I've seen the way they've tried to indoctrinate young people. This ticking time bomb was ticking loudly for all these years, from 2005, 2006, 2007 onwards. And I'm sorry to say that Israeli leaders, beginning with Mr. Netanyahu, turned a deaf ear to a bomb that was certain to go off. And that is my first point. Second point is, this government, frankly, I don't know if it can do what it should do, which is ensure that the complaint made by our Palestinian friend is looked into and rectified. It is a fact that the Palestinian people in the West Bank, who have taken no role at all, frankly, in what Hamas has done, and very frankly, the Palestinian administration, like it or not, recognized the state of Israel decades ago. But yet, there is And there are so many restrictions, even in the West Bank. And the Palestinian administration is completely hamstrung. And it is a fact also that illegal settlements have been sprouting up and that these settlements have not been brought under control. In my view, as a citizen of India, as someone who cares for peace and who, frankly, is from the beginning been an admirer of Israel and the right of Israel to exercise its rights as a sovereign state for the Jewish people, and as a citizen of a country that has recognized Palestine among the first countries to do so, that the West Bank, Israel must show the difference between the West Bank and Gaza by ensuring that the West Bank gets the kind of self-government that an independent country needs. The Palestine is an independent country. Gaza has been occupied. This part of the independent country of Palestine has been occupied by Hamas. This is a war between Israel and Hamas, not between Israel and the Palestinians. But the narrative is now Israel versus Palestine. The only way to stop this narrative is to do justice to the West Bank. And justice means allowing the Palestinian people. You go anywhere in the world, you'll find the Palestinian diaspora is as educated, as successful as the Indian diaspora or the Jewish diaspora, which is saying a lot. And you must allow them to exercise the full rights of sovereignty over what's an independent country. That unfortunately is not being attempted by this government. The mistake it made in the past of ignoring Hamas is now repeated by its mistake of ignoring the rightful claim of the Palestinian Authority to be functioning as an independent state rather than as some kind of a colony. Sneha.
Right. In fact, no, points very strongly made. Ashok Sajjanar, allow me a few minutes. Let me just go quickly across to Dror Eydar as well as Issa Amro to get their responses. Mr. Dror, please go ahead.
Sure.
Well, first of all, my colleague here, the Palestinian, does the same as his fellows. He cries and lies and do not look at reality in order to improve their life. He says that Israel does not supply food to Gaza. There are facts that were rectified by the UN. You can check it, okay? Suppose I'm lying. You can check it. If Israel supplied 500,000 tons to Gaza, just check it. It's a very close check. We know that Hamas take the food and sell it to its citizens. So this is one thing. Second, no leader of a Palestinian leader condemned this massacre of October 7th. No one. Third, my friend, professor, I have to update you because any poll in the Palestinian Authority shows that about 80% of the Palestinians in the West Bank, in Judea and Samaria, support Hamas. So if there will be election, you can ask why don't they do election for 20 years? But if they do, they understand that Hamas will take control even there. So I'm asking you, you know that Israel, the size of Israel is like a neighborhood in India. Do you want to put a 50, look behind me, you can see in about 30 kilometers, you see Ramallah in a height of 900 meters. I am now in 50 meters. Do you want to put a threat on Delhi only 30 kilometers far above more than 1 kilometer?
30 seconds, Mr. Dror, and then I have to move on.
Nazi Germany on us. We have a lesson in history that we should learn. The Palestinians never ever recognize Israel as a Jewish state. They do not recognize the rights of the Jews for self-determination and even for little
All
Israel.
right.
I want to hear one Palestinian leader in all the history that says that
Okay,
only Tel
Mr.
Aviv
Dror Eydar, you've
belongs
made your point.
to
I
the
need to
Jews.
go
Only Tel
across to
Aviv.
the other
Just to
panelists
finish it.
as well.
Just to finish it. Just to finish it. Only Tel Aviv. I want to hear any Palestinian say that only Tel Aviv belongs to the Jews by rights, by religious rights, by historical rights, by legal rights.
Okay,
Even
you've
this,
made your
they
point.
cannot
Issa
recognize.
Amro, please spare us few minutes. We will return to you. You have the right to respond. But let me very quickly get in Ashok Sajanhar as well. Ashok Sajanhar, we've seen India respond to the recent attack at Rafah. It's called it heartbreaking, but gone on to say that India is seeing both the sides. How do you look at India's position vis-a-vis the world? Is there a global reorder of equations?
Well, thank you very much, Sneha. You are right. I think India's position has evolved over the last 8 months. As Professor Nalapad said, right on the 7th of October when the attack took place, I think India was one of the first countries to condemn this heinous terrorist attack. And I would agree with our Israeli friend who said that more than an attack, it was a massacre. And the Israelis were taken quite by surprise. So there were not only 1,200 Israeli citizens, these were not military personnel or anyone who was posing a threat to Hamas, to Palestinian people or anything of that sort. They were massacred brutally, and then more than 250 hostages were taken. So India condemned that, and India has been defending the right of Israel to secure itself, to defend itself, and particularly when it's a small country and it is surrounded on all sides by other countries and other proxy agents. It's not only Hamas, it's also Hezbollah, it's also Houthi, it is also Iran, the big country with a 70 million population, which have said that we are going to sort of, throw Israel into the sea and Israel has no right to exist. So I tend to agree that this is a existential fight that Israel is fighting. That having been said, India has, as has been said earlier, we were one of the first to recognize the the right of the Palestinians to have their own independent state. We recognize the PLO. We have given them financial help to establish their own embassy, their own diplomatic representation in Delhi, and we continue to help them. So we have spoken out strongly against the violation of human rights and the necessity of Israel to follow the international humanitarian law. We have sent aid for the Palestinian people to Gaza. It has gone from our side. My Prime Minister has spoken to the leaders in that region, whether it is the President of Egypt, whether it is the King of Jordan, and of the other leaders, and trying to bring them together so that peace can be restored. We have also spoken out in favor of a two-state solution. I think that is very essential. I think the final point, Sneha, I would like to make here is that there has been, enough bloodshed, whatever the numbers are, and I tend to agree with our Israeli friend that, these numbers that are being bandied around, 35,000, 36,000, I think they need very serious correction. That having been said, I think the war has gone on far too long. I think Israel has also sent out its message very clearly that if there is in future any contemplation of a similar action against Israel, this is the sort of response that Israel is going to give. So I think that any adversaries of Israel will think not 10 times, 100 times before they engage in an attack like this. I think the Hamas would have known very clearly that Israel is not going to sit back if it is attacked in this manner. And they have been fighting from their civilian strongholds whether it is schools, it is madrasas, it is
Right.
mosques, it is hospitals, and they've bored all those tunnels. So I think the international community, what it needs to do, it needs to focus also on the hostages. We have not heard anything about the hostages, Sneha, over the last several months. I think
That's
that's a
true.
very good issue.
That's true.
Thank you. Let me end here. I know
That's
you
true.
want to go
In
to
fact,
the
let me
other.
just go across to... True. Let me just go across to Issa Amro at this point. Mr. Issa, let me come to you at this point. Israel has repeatedly been saying they will continue this till they have all their hostages back, till their people are returned to them. While the heart goes out to civilians who are a casualty of this war, both the sides, even particularly in Palestine, what would be the response to the demand to return the Israelis who have been taken as hostage?
I think the majority of the Israelis and the Jews in Israel are asking Netanyahu and his government to do a deal and make an exchange between the Israeli hostages in Gaza and Palestinian prisoners. Gantz said that, Izinkov said that we should do the exchange. Labid from the opposition in Israel said that, and I hear the Israeli people saying that let's end the hostages problem. And I am with that all the hostages should go back to their homes safe, I hope. But who's killing the hostages is the Israeli military, is the Israeli airstrikes in Gaza, and they don't care about their own civilians. And many Israelis, complained that Netanyahu and his very right-wing fascist government, they don't want the hostages to come back alive, and they want to continue with the war on the people in Gaza, and the Palestinians are paying very high price. I am very disappointed from Ashok, who is justifying the price tag which Israel is doing. Killing civilians is not justification to Israel and to anybody for not repeating what happened on October 7th. This is something severe. It's a war crimes. And supporting that, Ashok,
No,
it
I
means
don't
that
think he has
we will be
justified the
responsible
killing of
legally.
civilians, though.
Yes.
He has
Yes,
nowhere
yes.
justified the... Ashok Sajanar has nowhere justified the killings of civilians. That's not true.
Go back to what he said. It's very clear that he's trying to say that it's very high price to anybody to think to attack Israel. This is not price. Killing civilians, blood is not a price for anything. Something else. I'm stateless. I'm a Palestinian without a state.
Absolutely.
And if we remove Hamas completely, will the Palestinians have peace? Dror, I want your answer. How we can make peace? And I am sure, as a Palestinian activist, peace activist, I think peace is the only way for Israel to live peacefully among us, and peace according to the international law, not according to my opinion, not according to Dror's opinion, and not according to anybody else's opinion. It's about the international law. They want two-state solution with full prosperity for Palestinians, with autonomy and with sovereignty. And he's not offering us rights. It's our own state, it's our own land, it's our own rights, and we want to live without any kind of occupation, nor apartheid, no brutality from the Israeli settlers. Look how I live. My house is fenced completely in Hebron. Look to the fence, how I live. To protect myself from the Israeli settler violence. Nobody in the West Bank make the settlers accountable for their violence. Nobody make the Israeli soldiers accountable for their brutality toward us as Palestinians. Thanks to the ICC, thanks to the ICJ, who are now, after a huge public opinion all over the world, they take in consideration what's going on in the West Bank and what is going on Gaza, and about that Israel is moving from a normal state to a fascist state. This is unfortunately to say, with a presence of very far right-wing Itamar Ben-Gvir, who was not allowed to be in the Israeli military for his politics.
Issa Amro, I believe I've given you ample time.
Yes.
No, you've made your point very clear. You've shown us around as well. My last question to Professor Madhav Nalapat. Has the world order been redrawn now? It's practically impossible to return to what it was earlier, or is that an extreme statement to make?
Well, I'd like to point out that babies are babies. They have no politics. Women, frankly, mothers are mothers. Grandmothers are grandmothers. They have no politics. And I fully agree with Ashok about the the hostages. I think Hamas miscalculated terribly. It miscalculated that the capture of 200 and odd hostages would ensure that the Israeli army do nothing, because that was Netanyahu's record, exchanging one Israeli soldier for 1,000 people who were involved in acts of violence against the Jewish community. That is not a very good record. Having said that, Sneha, I'd like to say very clearly, the point is Gaza is being occupied by Hamas. It cannot be rectified by occupation by the IDF. The IDF will not succeed. The Israelis have not succeeded in winning the hearts and minds of Palestinians in the West Bank either. And in my personal view, Hamas, yes, it should go. And I think the whole of Palestinian society is understanding what Hamas brings to them. I doubt very much that even 8% is going to vote for Hamas if looking at the price the citizens of Gaza are paying. But the fact is that the citizens of Gaza, frankly, they should not be penalized for the fact that a terrorist entity has taken control of that enclave. And again, may I repeat, from my study of the history of that period, it has been done with the tacit silence from the side of even the most right-wing Israeli government, including the present government, which never expected an attack from Gaza, and it was focusing all its attention, frankly, on the Palestinian Authority, which has accepted the right of the Jewish people to their own state, something that no civilized human being will ever refuse to a people who were massacred and annihilated by a psychotic named Adolf Hitler in the 1940s. The Jewish people have a right to their homeland. They have a right to their ancestral homeland, the state of Israel. So do our Palestinian friends. And the point is, give self-respect to the Palestinian Authority, and you will ensure that nobody goes for Hamas, frankly.
And we're totally out of time, sir.
Unfortunately, what has happened is the Palestinian people was treated with contempt, and Hamas was allowed to grow under the very eyes of Benjamin Netanyahu.
Professor Madhav Nalapat, Ashok Sarjanhar, Dror Eydar, as well as Issa Amro, thank you very much for joining us. This is a hugely sensitive issue that is being watched globally very carefully. All eyes are on this situation. We just hope that the worst is possibly over. But unfortunately, certainly this is not the last that we are hearing on this. Thank you very much for joining us on this very sensitive issue.
Thank you.
It's time for a very short break. On the other side, we'll bring you all the latest and the big developments of the day in the late night edition.